On this episode of DLN Xtend, we talk about what contributions Ubuntu has made to Linux. This episode of DLN Xtend is brought to you by DigitalOcean and Bitwarden. Welcome to episode 43 of DLN Xtend. DLN Xtend is a community-powered podcast. We take conversations from the DLN community from places like the DLN Discourse forums, Telegram groups, Discord servers, and more. We also take topics from other shows around the network and give our takes. So with me today, and we are down a photographer, but with me, as always, is the person with the most unhealthy obsession with OpenSUSE I know.
Almost unhealthy.
Totally unhealthy.
Well, it's good to be here as always, Matt. I enjoy our conversations. Who else can I disagree with and smile on my face at the same time?
I'm sure plenty of people.
That's true. There's several of those. Not so much the smile though.
Touche. So Nate, what have you been up to this week though?
Well, lots of little things. I have been looking at doing a project. So I have an elderly mother, and she is, the winter years of her life, as it were. And she has all these CDs of different things she likes to listen to. And so she has like a stack of CDs and an old like 1990s looking boombox thing. And frankly, it's I think the term we like to do is kludgy. It's for her to do it because she's older and shaky. She's wheelchair bound and everything else. So it's difficult for her to manage this. So I wasn't even actively searching this out, but I stumbled upon this Arduino-powered dementia-friendly media player. Now, my mother does not have dementia, but she's a little bit technologically impaired, as it were. Not a fan of technology, although she is the one that first taught me how to use the Commodore 64, back in the 80s, so 10 years ago. Media player, it's very simple. It's like Arduino, it's Arduino-powered, and it has this little, this mini MP3 module player, this DF player, that you wire into it. And what it does is it makes you put the files on an SD card and use a little rotary encoder, potentiometer to adjust volume, rotary encoder to like change channels. So think of it like a radio type interface, 2 knobs. And so she could turn, what I can do then is rip her CDs to the SD card. And then if she wants to listen to different CDs, she just turns the rotary knob and it goes to the different tracks or whatever. And they just have it randomly go through whatever tracks are on the SD card. You can divide it by folders. So like essentially as you turn the knob, would go to a different folder in the on the SD card. And so I just stumbled upon it this week. And so I ordered the parts I needed today to build one. I already got an Arduino Uno to prototype it on, and I guess some other little controllers that I can use instead. But so I'm going to put this thing together so that she can have like a little old timey kind of radio as far as interface goes, and then be able to enjoy whatever tunes she wants to enjoy, right next to her bed or when she's in a wheelchair or whatever. So that's what I have going on. I'm kind of excited about it. It's all open source. All the modules are open source. The software is open source. I'll probably make some modifications and submit it up, or at least I'll have it on my GitHub, because I'll use that thing. Try and improve upon it. Maybe eventually put like a little display on there. So I'm going to build at least one, but I'll probably build another one just to kind of continue to play with it, because it might be something I can iterate on. But that's what I have going on, and I'm kind of excited about it. I think I told my mom about it yesterday, and she was pretty excited about the idea. She's like, "Oh, good! I wouldn't have to mess with the CDs." So,
cool.
We're going to move her from the 90s to today. It'll be great. Could advance for a whole 5 years.
Now you're
How long ago was 90s? I can't remember.
31 years ago, Nate.
Nope. Nope. I can't go with that.
Well, you're gonna have to, because reality would tell you otherwise. Just saying.
Yeah, that time thing. It's so weird. So, Matt, what do you have going on?
I have been messing around yet again with the Pine phone.
Yes.
Actually, I tried not the newest version. A newer version of LunaOS, which is WebOS, basically.
Okay.
It's just the open source version. Not gonna lie, the improvements that have been made since the last time I fully used it have been really nice. Like, they fixed a lot of stuff that there was a lot of issues before, and not so much anymore. Things like screen dimming actually works now, whereas before.
Nice.
Whereas before,
that's a luxury right there.
Before, what would happen is the screen would dim, but it's almost to the point you can't even see really the screen. So like the backlight's just basically off or almost off. That's been fixed. So you use the slider in the actual OS, works perfectly fine. Wi-Fi still a bit hit or miss, at least for me. It could be some of my own network stuff. So I'm not. I try not to judge the Wi-Fi based solely on like just my experience.
Well, frankly, you have a chronic issue with Wi-Fi. You complain about it in the OpenSUSE installer. Now you complain about it in LunaOS. It's probably a Matt thing.
I've been enjoying it. I still think Ubuntu Touch is the preferred OS right now for the Pine phone. LunaOS has come a long way. The cameras don't it's the typical story that you hear with the Pine phone, like the cameras don't work and that kind of stuff. But as far as OSs that I want to see where they go, it's really LunaOS and UbiPorts or Ubuntu Touch. Like those to me are like the two, like, okay, these are really cool. And they're the ones that are the best probability of success on that kind of hardware, because, we talk about companies, doing open hardware and open source phones and all the other stuff. And we want Linux powered phones. Well, we got the Linux powered phone. How about we, start getting into that, supporting the Linux powered OSs that are already there, as opposed to re-implementing the work like certain other players have done.
Right. I'd like to see, like Ubuntu Touch does work very well, and I am pleased with that. Though I don't know if you saw it on Twitter today, or maybe it was yesterday. I can't remember now. But there has been another release for the OpenSUSE version of that. So guess who bought a 64 gigabyte SD card?
Your kids?
Yes. No, me. But the I just bought.
Surprise.
They just came in the mail because I was planning. I knew this was going to happen. I knew they were working on it. And I saw an earlier post, and I wasn't really interested in the Posh user interface, although I will try it. So I have two 64 gigabyte SD cards. I downloaded one of the images. I can't remember which was one of the not the Posh one, but the other one. And so yeah, I'm pretty excited about the. I think it's Plasma based. I'm quite sure.
No, Plasma Mobile.
Yeah, I'm quite sure it is. I could be wrong, but that's what I read, and I read it very quickly. But they have images available as of today, and I am going to be getting those going. But they have, in fact, when we're done talking today, the Plamo and Fosh, I guess, not Posh. But yeah, so I'm downloading those so I can give those a whirl, because I'm really excited about seeing how it works. But it'd be nice to just see, nothing against the UbiPorts or Loon or anybody else, but there's something about that chameleon that just kind of brings that smile to my face, and I really just can't get away from it.
Yeah, you and that chameleon. That's all I'm gonna say.
It is an almost unhealthy obsession.
It has now fully blown into what I've been saying, an unhealthy obsession.
All right, fine.
So, but no, that's pretty much what I've been up to. So other than that, not a whole lot on the computing front. So
this episode of DLN Xtend is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean recently announced their new app platform service, which is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. With App Platform, you can build, deploy, and scale apps and static websites quickly and easily. Simply point your GitHub repositories and let the App Platform do all the heavy lifting. It has support for Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, static sites, and Docker. DigitalOcean runs all of their app platform on their own infrastructure, so your costs are significantly lower than with any other products. Plus, they built this new app platform on top of DigitalOcean Kubernetes, providing a smoother migration path so you can take more control of your infrastructure setup. As a listener to DLN Xtend podcast and a member of the DLN community, you can get started for free. Actually, better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you a $100 credit when you go to do.co/DLN. Again, go to do.co/DLN to get started with your $100 credit on top of DigitalOcean's new app platform. We want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of DLN Xtend.
So speaking of contributions and Nate contributing to helping his mom getting into the newer century, and me always jumping around on the Pine phone and contributing to my distro hopping ways just on a new platform. Let's talk about Ubuntu's contributions to Linux.
When Ubuntu first came on the scene, 2004, I think it was 2003, sometime.
2004.
I wasn't really a fan of Ubuntu. I didn't care. It was Debian based, and I just didn't care. But I find now that I've grown up and I'm a little more mature, and I've intermingled in other Linux communities or in lots of communities, I have to say I am so impressed with Ubuntu's contributions to the open source ecosystem. I don't mean just Linux, but just open source software, software accessibility, so many things that they've done that has made my life so much better. And also getting to know people in the Ubuntu communities, like the Martin Wimpress and the Alan Popes, who've really actually inspired me to do more in Linux, to do more knowledge exploration. And I know that's not really directly Ubuntu and Canonical's contribution. I mean, it is in a way. They've been such an enormously important piece of the whole Linux puzzle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Canonical, as for all the flack they will get, and Ubuntu as a project have helped Linux desktop in ways people don't ever really seem to realize. I think the thing I remember is, I remember installing Sled 10, like Sled 10.1, 10.0, all those, OpenSUSE 10 and all the other stuff. They were all right, but they didn't have a focus on like the quote unquote normies, normal people. What was Ubuntu's original thing? Linux for everyone, or Linux for
humans, I think.
Linux for humans. That's kind of what they did. The original thing was, well, if you're using Ubuntu, you're too stupid to install Debian, basically. Ironically enough, Debian is now getting to the point where they're debating whether or not they can even install their own OS. Based on their principles and stuff, in fairness. But Ubuntu and Canonical, because they go hand in hand, have made desktop Linux more known to the general computer audience. The little more tech savvy people, but not the people like you and me and who are like uber enthusiasts for tech. And that is something that was needed, because it helped kind of break away from the, Linux is this hackery OS that you always see, because NVIDIA was demonstrating something on one of their platforms for, I think it was AI. And on the projector, you ended up seeing like the Unity interface get thrown up. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. They're like the most powerful GPU on the most powerful platform or something along those lines. And you see a Unity picture. I'm like, all right, that kind of thing. Like those little things, that kind of marketing matters. It really does. So for me, there's been more than enough contributions from Canonical that I don't think people realize. One of them for me was actually the 100 Paper Cuts initiative, which was literally focused solely on fixing the desktop.
Now, I was never really a big Ubuntu desktop user, so that didn't directly affect me like immediately. But what it did do is it really raised the standard for desktops. All desktops. I'm a KDE user, so it didn't really directly affect me. But what it did do is it set the standard. It raised the standard for the other desktops. They saw it was something to look at and say, wow, they've really fixed that. How can we use that, in our world, as it were. I will say that I appreciated all those different initiatives that they took that absolutely helped me out. So I know that Unity Desktop was held up for a long time as, such a great desktop. And it wasn't really not my favorite paradigm. But there are things like before Unity, there wasn't that K launcher thing in Plasma. I don't know if that was inspiration from it. I think someone told me that there was some inspiration from that. So those little things like that really helped me out, because I use that all the time. Because I got a little secret here, but sometimes when you're running like the brand new Plasma, it gets a little squirrely, like on an update. So it's nice to be able to use that K runner and restart Plasma, if it gets a little squirrely. And that doesn't happen all the time, but it's a nice thing to be able to just really quickly go on that. And it's a totally separate process. And so when you kill plasma or whatever, you can very easily restart it. So little things like that. Or, if you're running the K-Organizer, Contact, Kmail, sometimes that application or that whole suite of applications, the database, sometimes it gets a little squirrely too. And so Krunner, which I think was inspired by Unity, also helps to kind of clear up that issue pretty quickly. Yeah, for sure. Their paper cut initiative, that was great for everybody, and everybody benefited from the work that they put into that.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, I don't think they get a lot of credit for that kind of stuff, because that was a focus on the desktop at a time when other companies had, let's just say, the desktop wasn't a focus at all.
Right.
At the time. And I find that contribution is a tremendous one that doesn't get played up enough. Another one, like for me personally, my take is they made desktop Linux by making desktop Linux accessible to again, I'm using this hyperbolically, the normies. It brought in a lot of fresh blood to the overall open source community.
Yeah, it absolutely did. It made it so that people who maybe just were just dissatisfied with their current situation could easily explore, and the installer is just so easy to use that it was a great gateway into this world of open source software.
By doing that, that's a way of marketing. And at a time when no one else was doing any type of marketing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That is a big thing, because I don't think people understand like the iterations of like marketing and outreach and stuff that Canonical or even Ubuntu as a project has done. The things where they at one point were sending discs worldwide to if you just wanted one, or I remember at one point you could walk into a Best Buy and actually buy an Ubuntu OS disc right next to a Windows 7 at the time, Windows 7 or Vista at the time. And you take your pick of, and stuff like that mattered. It really did at the time. And they don't get a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. That they do not get the credit for that, and they should. I mean, they really did advance the push into, as you said, for normies. And even to this day, even though I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a fan of the OpenSUSE project.
Unhealthily so.
I kind of keep it a secret. I don't make a big deal out of it.
Lies.
But even me, like I had some relatives this past summer. They're just like asking me all these Linux questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do these things? And younger cousins, in the 20s, I think, maybe teens. I don't know. I can't ever tell people's age, because I was just a teenager 5 years ago, right? I gave them a USB drive with Ventoy on it, and I put on Kubuntu. I put Tumbleweed on. No, I put Leap on there. I think it was Leap, and then Ubuntu proper, so they could actually play with these different distributions. But I did lean heavier toward Ubuntu, because I know that when they install it, they will have a good experience with Ubuntu, most likely. And they're not technologically impaired,
mm-hmm.
but they are new to that whole area. So I mean, if you want to try something new and experience something that kind of holds your hand along the way, and then gives you that opportunity to explore further and deeper, Ubuntu is a way to go. And also their updates. Their update system is not broken at all. Here's something that I think that does not get enough appreciation. But when you update from one version of Ubuntu to another, it works. It works well. There are some distributions that do not work when they update. Like they break. That's what they always say: nuke and pave. You don't have to nuke and pave with Ubuntu.
Nope.
And so I mean, they don't get the credit for that. I mean, of course, you don't have to do with OpenSUSE either. But it's nice to see that they really took the time to make it work and make it work well. They really, that's another paper cut issue that they smooth that sucker down, and it's great. It's in fact, when you get, go from LTS to LTS, you don't get that first release of the LTS. They wait to the next point release,
mm-hmm.
and they make sure that their users have a good upgrade experience. Now, if you're one of those, people like to live on the edge of a broken heart or a broken system, I mean, then you're going to have, you can upgrade quicker. But it's nice to see that they really take the time to ensure that the experience is good with Ubuntu, and they work so hard at it, and they do not get the credit they deserve for that. So
I want to be clear. Besides my Pop OS machine, I run nothing Ubuntu based anymore, and the Pop OS machine is more because I need it for the hardware, not because I want Pop! OS because I'm not a GNOME guy. So these perspectives are actual users outside of the Ubuntu sphere. Like Nate is very OpenSUSE, like he makes no issues about that. I'm very much in the Arch. I'm very much in the Arch camp for the most part. These are outside viewers looking at the project and what is contributed to the overall community.
Absolutely.
So if we can do that, why can't the rest of the community? That has always been the sticking point, I think, because we'll bring up one thing: snaps.
Yeah, this one just boggles my mind. Like I hear the arguments, I've heard the arguments, and I just cannot wrap my head around why people are upset about snaps. Like I hear the arguments, they don't make sense. And I would love for somebody to really actually make an argument that is good enough for me to stop using snaps. Right now, I just look to see how many snaps I've installed on my OpenSUSE machine. Mm-hmm. Yes, I run snaps on my OpenSUSE machine. I think I have 52 snaps installed. Like I like to play with software. It's fun. Or I should say the 52 snaps, like snap modules, because some of those are support modules, like the GNOME stack or whatever, GTK stack, the core, and so forth. It is so convenient to have snaps on my system. So I don't know if you knew this, but sometimes your distribution may not have a packaged version of the application you want, or maybe it's not a well-loved application, you could say. Like not every community wants this thing. So there's some things like in OpenSUSE that do not exist, but do exist in the Snap Store and make it very easy to install. And so it's very nice to be able to take, like Slack, for instance. There isn't, at least last time I checked, and it's been a while, there wasn't a version of Slack for OpenSUSE. So what do? I install the Snap. It's really easy to install it. PowerShell. I installed PowerShell with a Snap. Very easy. Now, here's the other nice thing, too. Because I do run a rolling distribution, Tumbleweed, when there are these massive updates, like where a lot of the base libraries are updated and kernel and everything else, it has to a lot of other things version as well. One of the biggest irritants and when I distribution update is my Arduino IDE, because every time that thing gets an update, it's 700 megabytes that get downloaded. So I do a zipper update, or zipper dup rather, zipper distribution update, to be clear, make sure my words are correct. I have an issue where things don't necessarily, what takes a long time to update. So if I move some of those things over to the Snap camp, although I'm sure some people would say, oh, that's not safe, blah, whatever. Now it's very easy to do a distribution update and not have to worry about updating everything else. Like not all my applications need to be updated because it kind of runs in its own little runtime. Mm-hmm. So that makes my life a lot easier and a lot more efficient. Okay, yeah, the argument was like their back end or whatever isn't open source. Now, I did read that if you wanted to run your own Snap instance, that is a possibility. You can absolutely do that, and they won't stop you. And there are ways to make it work. So I guess the reason nobody's done it is because the same reason that FlatHub now exists, because centralized in some instances works.
Yeah, but that centralization isn't open source. So here's my take. Install OBS that is generically just from the repos. Let's just say you're on Ubuntu, for argument's sake. Install the repo version, then go install the Snap version. You'll notice a whole lot more options in the Snap features and functions that have been added. Thank you, Martin Wimpress, by the way, to the OBS Snap than there are on the default install on a pull down from the archives of an OBS.
Since we talked about it today, I haven't actually really used OBS much lately. I don't know if you could tell. I just installed the OBS Snap because there's something wrong with the NDI plugin on the OpenSUSE side. I don't know if it's because of some version mismatches or whatnot. And I just don't want to deal with that. If that makes any sense. I only have so much time in my day, and do I need to? If I want to mess with something and I want to dig in and fix the problem, yes, I absolutely would find out what the problem is with the NDI plugin, maybe do some bug reports, but they didn't build an RPM for it. But I can install the Snap, which gives me that NDI plugin, and then I can just use it, and then I don't have to really, dork around with it. And then I think that can, that makes my when I want to get something done, go from 0 to complete. If my mission is to get the job done, now I have a much quicker path for that. And again, Martin Wimpress, I thank you for the work you put into OBS Studio for all of us. I mean, you took the time, you as a member of the Ubuntu community, took it upon yourself to make our lives easier. And I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Things that specifically like Martin have brought into the table is like the Ubuntu Mate software boutique at a time when that wasn't a thing. People didn't think about the initial install process and everything else, like software selection and all that stuff. Nobody thought about that. Oh, it's in the repo, just install it later. Like first boot, hey, look, here's a bunch of applications you might want. That little stuff is what I've found is what Canonical's and Ubuntu's contribution as a community project too have been about. It's thinking about some more of the little stuff. Like one of the best features in Unity was probably the HUD. The best example anyone can ever give you, go use the menu system in GIMP by default, or do you hit Alt while you're in GIMP and just type in what you need? So you're not messing through nested menus. Ubuntu as a project, the other major selling point, I think, has been the eyes that has been brought to Linux specifically. Now you can argue about, oh, well, it's too specific to Ubuntu. What's been brought from a hardware support level, though, that's its big, like, if not just the fresh blood and the fresh ideas and all the other stuff, the hardware support that has been brought into it, things like, take your pick, when Dell made its first, like, hey, we're going to support Linux machines back in like 2007. That was like, what? The major OEM hasn't done Linux support like that in, 7 years.
Ever?
I mean, well, you had like the initial Red Hat systems, but I'm not counting those.
That's what I said, ever.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where you look at it and it's like they've made a lot of OEM deals. They've made a lot of hardware support possible. Companies that do target Linux, yes, they target Ubuntu, but the community finds ways to make it work on other versions. And it's generically, they find it's not that hard to make it work on other versions. I generically tend not to care if it's like Ubuntu specific support. I think Ubuntu really has contributed a lot more than people will ever give it credit for. It's just, it was the popular distro. It still is the most popular distro, despite what people say. Even if you want to say, oh, well, DistroWatch, go look at DistroWatch at anything that is based on Ubuntu. So that means Mint. That means all the derivatives of Ubuntu. That means all the official flavors. It's still the biggest distro.
It is.
And that will grind people's gears to no end. That's just what it is. So for me, I love what Canonical has helped contribute, what Ubuntu from the project, the Canonical portion has brought in, and what the community around Ubuntu has helped build as well, because it really is a collaborative effort. Now, like any project, yes, it does have its growing pains. Yes, it does have its issues. Yes, there is some stuff that you may or may not agree with, but that's any project.
Right. Well, nothing's perfect. And I would say, and I think that's one of the beauties of the open source world too, is nothing is perfect. So there's always a place to grow and to do more and make it better. It's a journey, as it were, and they are really, captaining. That's not the right word, but they're really at the helm of the ship, really driving this thing and making it better for everybody. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
So here's the question to the audience: what are some of the contributions you think Ubuntu has made to Linux as a whole?
This episode of DLN Xtend is brought to you by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the easiest, safest way for individuals, teams, businesses, and organizations to store their passwords. The fact that Bitwarden is not only open source but has had third-party security testing done is one reason I have chosen to trust them with my passwords. On their blog, they have recently announced another third-party security review has been completed. They have the security assessment available for anyone to review. My favorite part of the report, and I quote, "No exploitable vulnerabilities were discovered." Thank you, Bitwarden, for offering such a feature-rich password manager and making security checks a priority. You can get started with a free account by going to bitwarden.com/DLN. Want to support this open source project and help them continue to conduct third-party security audits? That support starts at only $10 a year. Jump over to bitwarden.com/DLN to learn more.
So speaking of more contributions, not just from Ubuntu, but Nate, what are some of the contributions you're looking to make to various areas of your life currently?
Well, one of the areas of my life that is getting a little bit rusty and old is my truck. I have a 2001 Ford F-350. It's my primary mode of transportation. It's diesel. I like how it smells. I know that sounds weird. It's an older truck. It was a retired farm truck I got some years back. And so it wasn't in the best of shape when I got it, but it came with a plow and I bought it for $6,500. So I got a good deal on it with the plow. And it needed some things, and I've done a lot of work to it. But one of the things that's happened because of the ravages of Michigan's snowy, icy weather is road salt. And road salt basically eats away, at the metal on the truck. And the other reality is you cannot go one quiet night, during a quiet summer's night, you can hear a Ford rusting someplace in Michigan. So my truck, the truck bed is not doing well. It requires a ratchet strap to kind of keep the sides in, to kind of hold it tight now. And it's not good. And today I was hauling firewood in it, like a whole truckload of firewood. And it's okay as long as it's, there's ratchet straps on there, but it's just, it's just not a safe setup. So I have been looking for a new truck bed for my truck. It sounds really unexciting, but I'm going to be removing the old truck bed, off of it. And then I'm going to rewire the entire back because when I put trailer light hookup in there, the wires it's starting to get the green rot. The insulation is getting brittle, which means it cracks, which means you get more contaminants in there, which means it's eventually the lights are going to stop working eventually. So the truck is 20 years old now. It's time for a new bed and it's time for a new wiring harness. And I'm looking to get that done when the weather gets a little bit nicer out, like when I don't have to fight the road salt. I'm going to be taking the truck bed off. The new one I get, it'll probably be beat up and old. In fact, what I'm looking at is beat up and old, but not rusty. I'm going to kind of undercoat it, rhino liner it, and then make it so I can work with the truck. I don't need a truck to be pretty. I'm old and not pretty, so a truck that's old and not pretty is just fine. And I want to be able to haul stuff in it, haul firewood, haul building supplies, gravel, rocks, mulch, whatever it takes, so I can use the truck without having to keep a ratchet strap the whole thing together. And I'll probably kind of go for the more rustic kind of utility looking vehicle, nothing pretty. So probably paint it like a flat, like pewter gray or something like that, the whole thing. But yeah, that's what I have going on. I'll be doing some calling around and see what I can find so I can secure it and put it in a garage or barn or something until the weather kind of breaks.
I was expecting an OpenSUSE green, just saying.
No, that'll be, instead of the Ford logo on the front, I'm going to put a chameleon over the blue oval just because I think that'll be fun.
Why is it I can expect you to have a plushie hanging from the mirror kind of deal?
Oh, I don't do that because I might, if I'm driving, I might just start looking at it and then I'll drive into something and that wouldn't be good. So because when you have a plow in the front of your truck and you hit somebody with it, it's not really going to affect me very much, but it will affect somebody else, and I don't want to infringe on somebody else's road liberties. So Matt, what exciting things do you have going on? Are you going to enable me to look at something else on the internet game-wise?
It depends. It depends on what you consider a quote-unquote retro system. So I've been going through my backlog of games, which is absurd. So I've been playing some PS3 games, and one of them is Persona 4 Arena, which is a fighting game. It's a 2D fighting game that is based around the Persona 4 games. Persona 4 game, like the initial game, is a Japanese RPG. So the games that I am now playing continue that story, but in a completely different genre. So now we're in fighting game territory. And it's just one of those games where it plays a lot like the classic, Super Nintendo kind of games. And it feels good to play. It's really weird. If you've ever played some of the old King of Fighters or some of the old Guilty Gear games, but if you played any like the old, Super Nintendo fighting games, that's the kind of the aesthetic vibe that I get from it, as well as kind of like the gameplay mechanic side, but with kind of like a more fast paced feel to it.
So when you say fighting game, is it more like a, because you're gonna have to probably go back a little further for me.
Maybe
another couple years.
Think
Street Fighter.
Think Street Fighter 2. the original.
Okay, all right.
But with a more fast pace to it, not like uber fast pace, but like technology fast pace. So like, you know, instead of whatever we got back in like the Super Nintendo days for like FPS, put it at like a 720p 30 instead, and that's kind of what you get for a frame rate kind of deal. But the character design and that stuff is something that I love, because I'm not gonna lie, if there's one other series I'm a fanboy for besides Final Fantasy, like certain versions of Final Fantasy, it's gonna be Persona. I'm a big Persona fan because they focus on story. And these games came out, almost 8 years ago, and they were one of the first fighting games that I remember playing, besides maybe Injustice, that had solely focused on story. And that to me is always amazing to see. And so this is on the PS3. I do not know if it works with the PS3 emulator. Don't know, don't care. I play it on actual hardware. So for me, I'm all about it. It's been a fun experience, and I love it. I'm not the great. So as much as I rag on Ryan for, you know, being bad at video games, Ryan, in this particular case, don't feel bad, because I love fighting games, but I'm terrible at them.
So I'm not. I think Super Smash Brothers for the Switch is probably the only real fighting game I play these days. But you know, it doesn't really have story at all. It's just a fighter. Mm-hmm. And there was we'll go back a few more years, so back to the 80s. We'll have to rewind another 3 years or so. I'm bad at math. There was a game called Karateka. I think that's how it's pronounced, for the Commodore 64. It was a fighting game where you basically, more like I guess it might be a precursor to like the Double Dragon style of fighting games, except you couldn't really pick up any weapons. But you're this fighter, and you have to go rescue the girl, you know, and you fight all the henchmen, and then you got to fight the main boss, and his eagle or bird or vulture or whatever it is that comes at you. I can't tell. And so I was kind of envisioning that as kind of it has a good story. Just text. You know, obviously there's not a whole lot of speech synthesis in 1980, whatever. But yeah, no, I think a good fighting game with good stories. I think a good story is what really I think kind of keeps you into the game. You know, like it carries you through when the fun aspect can kind of come and go, or like, you know, when you get kind of used to it. You know what I mean? How like it's at that arc of a game when you accomplish how to use it versus when the new discoveries become less. So as you become more of a master of it. Anyway, so I think that's a story kind of helps you through those things. Big reason why I like downloadable or additional content. It makes those kind of experiences even more fun, I would say, you know, when you get into the game and whatnot. But yeah, I'm not familiar with this game at all. It sounds fun. I have a PlayStation 3, a real PlayStation 3 on my gaming rack that I built last year. And it gets continual usage. But
like you, I have the Fat Boy PS3. So if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, generically, I think you can pick them up for like $15, like the disc version. They're not like super expensive. So that was just saying, you know, if you want something to try.
Oh, it's a good suggestion. I mean, is it? I like the artwork that they use for it. I like that. I don't know if it's like what that's called. Is that an anime?
Yeah, it's an anime art style.
Yeah, I like that style. I didn't always like that style, but I think some do it very well and some don't. But I think that's done. I like the way they do it. We'd like to continue this discussion with you on Telegram and Discourse, Mumble, or Discord. Visit the DLN website for information on how to connect to the social channels and all of our shows and creators at DestinationLinux.Network. For more information on where you can find me, you can go to cubiclenate.com. Links to my regular written blatherings, podcast, and YouTube channel can be found there.
You can find my random ramblings on Twitter at MattDLN. And Wendy will eventually find a social network that will let her do stuff on it. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with another episode of DLN Xtend. Until then, have a great week, everybody.